Hello there, I'm Leo Walder for Kit Guru, and this case here is the NZXT N450 or Noctis 450. I'm reviewing it with the Kraken X61 liquid cooler just to keep the whole NZXT look and feel, which is why we have a Kraken X61 box over there. The case was supplied in a plain brown package, so there's no big case box behind me. I'm doing this review sort of the other way around to my usual way, in that I've started with it stripped down and actually running to show you the guts of the thing, and then I'll dress it up in all the Noctis paraphernalia. So what we basically have here is an H440 case, which if you cast your mind back about a year, that is an NZXT quiet case. So it's a regular shape and size, it's all steel construction, painted on the inside as well as on the panels. And it's built for quiet. So the front and top panels were vented, but quite subtly at the sides, and it was lined with sort of neoprene noise deadening material. It had some nice features in this sort of built-in power supply cover, which is actually riveted into the case, so you have to slide the power supply in from the back. You can't put the power supply in as you can with the Fantech, say, and then put the cover in place. It is an integrated part of the case, which in one respect is a pain in the backside, but on the other hand means that they can build in this lighting system to it. So that was the H440, and you have this light on the power supply cover and also on the I/O panel, which is, you might think, fairly pointless. Who needs to see the back of their case? It does actually have a function of helping you find the ports and connectors in a dimly lit room. So on the one hand, a bit of bling, on the other hand, it's actually got a function. This N450, they've added this lighting under the case as well, and they've raised it up on these sorts of hard plastic feet. So we have light in the power supply cover, light at the back, light underneath. It's got a fancy name, it's called Underglow. There are two colour variants of this case. We have this white case with blue lighting, we have a black case with red lighting, and that's fine. I personally, I think I'd prefer a third option, which basically had a more neutral colour scheme, perhaps clear lighting, because let's face it, if you have a Republica Gamer system, black with red, easy peasy. If you have one of the Gigabyte blue boards, then this would probably suit you very nicely. There are going to be people out there, say, with yellow hardware who are going to go, well, where do I fit into this? Or indeed green hardware. Blue and red, good, but it doesn't seem to me to cover all the bases. So this system here, as I say, I've chosen to put this NZXT liquid cooler in it to kind of continue the look and feel, but I can well imagine that you might end up with a variant on the theme which looks actually a little bit messy in terms of colour coordination. Around the back of the system at the top, there's a button which is a toggle switch. I hope you can see this under this lighting. If I toggle it, we should see that that's the rear light goes off, and that's the underglow lighting is dimmed, and that's the underglow lighting off. And now we have the power supply lighting off, and now we should be all back to square one. So it's nicely done. I like the way they've done this. It, on the other hand, is nowhere near as posh as the high-end Fantech systems, which gives you, I forget how many colours that was, 12 I believe, where it stepped you through all the colours of the rainbow and back again, and very nicely so. If NZXT was to upgrade this LED system to include multiple colours, then that for me would be good. As it is, it's perfectly nice, thank you very much, it's nicely done. It's not brilliant, but in terms of the cosmetics of the system, as it stands, what you're looking at is an H440 with a slightly updated LED system. You still get the three 120 fans at the front, you get the 140 fan at the rear, and then around the back of the case, what you have here is a PWM hub. Now, the H440 had a fan splitter system, which I believe had 11 connections. So it's essentially one input or control, and then it would go 10 ways. So you could plug in any number of fans to the one hub. This is a proper PWM system, so you have power going to it. You also have a motherboard header. You can, if you choose, using an extension cable that's part of it, connect it to your CPU fan as well. So you can have the entire caboose controlled off the one header, which goes to this hub. And if that's your preferred method of controlling your fan speeds, it works, and it works well. On the other hand, that little connector there, which is the Molex connector that feeds everything, so you do indeed need a Molex connection on your power supply to feed this system. Forget about SATA, it needs to be a Molex. One of the cables actually came loose when I was connecting the whole system together. I don't think I was especially brutal with it. It's when I was trying to cable tie things together, but it was it meant that most of the system didn't work. The fans didn't work and half the lighting didn't work. Spotted what I'd done, pushed the bullet back into place, popped it all together. It's been fine ever since. So not sure whether that was me or the factory, but it wasn't perfect. Up here we have the hub control for the LED lighting system, which is why the wiring then feeds off and through to the power. So it's messy would be the wrong word. It's a little involved. It's not exactly highly integrated, let's put it that way, because this PWM hub is in the location that the previous fan splitter was in. They've obviously added this little extra hub, and then they've had to string all the cabling together so it kind of runs around the side. Now, NZXT has supplied a whole bunch of these cable tie-down points for cable management, loads and loads of them. They've done a really good job there. But nonetheless, you do end up having to sort of secure quite a lot of wiring, which is sort of almost the infrastructure of the case. Also, it's worth noting that when the case arrived, the front fans and the rear fan were already plugged into the PWM hub, so it really was as ready to go as you're going to get. In that respect, nicely done. So, let me just brutally shut off the power. I think that's the wise move. And pull out the power supply cable. So, it's an interesting case, but as I say, the guts of it we have seen before, been around for about a year, and very successful it was too. So you have a steel chassis painted, very smart. The power supply cover is integrated into the case, which means they can then use it as a sort of a foundation for these two SSD sleds, which one thumb screw, out it comes, attach the drive, put it back in. The thing is that they're obviously hard up against the motherboard, so your SATA cables are going to go basically vanishing into those little holes there, and then essentially you'll be looping the cable back on itself to connect it to the motherboard, because let's face it, most SATA connections are going to be in the same area. Not a problem. They don't really have a lot of say in the matter, frankly, if you're going to mount the SSDs there, but it does mean the cables essentially only stretching that far, which obviously means they kind of go back on themselves to connect up. Sliding the power supply in, there's a removable plate, it slides in, then you screw it home, which means all the cabling is under here. Now, from this side of things, you can see absolutely nout. From this side of things, you can see quite a lot. It's not especially pretty. On the plus side, one of the changes from the H440 to the N450 means that all the neoprene noise deadening material in the side panels has been taken out, and that used to intrude quite significantly into the back of the system. You've got about 20 mil of space. In this, you do have that 20 mil. With the previous version, you lost a fair bit of it to noise deadening material. So in that respect, you're on a winner. Perhaps that's exaggerating it somewhat. Couple of things around the back, apart from the toggle switch for the lighting, is we have these grommets for external liquid cooling systems. Well, who the heck's going to use that with this? I think we can do without those. Thank you. You've got 7 expansion slots. Now, what that means is that the space inside the case is sorely limited. I mean, that's a dead giveaway. If you had 8 or 9, you know you've got loads of space. 7, you know you're quite tight. If you look above and below the motherboard, there is no space to speak of. Below the board, absolutely nout. And as the power supply cover is fixed, you're basically just having to make do amend when it comes to cable management. There is just no latitude whatsoever, and no way you can sort of sneak it away apart from feeding it through the cable management holes and then losing it down here. Above the board, it's a bit of a sort of a mixed thing. There is space. You've got enough space for a 30mm thick liquid cooling system, but you can't go super chunky. Also, the mounting holes are a bit of a curious thing because it can accommodate, let me just check I'm not going to lie to you, you can accommodate up to a 360 radiator at the front or a 360 radiator in the roof, or indeed you can go for 280s. You can have a pair of 360s in the thing. That's no problem at all. But so I'm just checking my notes. I had a recollection you could do something different with the cooling. But the thing is that the slots are offset. So if you're using 120s, you can go there like this, you see, which means that they're offset away from the motherboard. If you're using 140 units, then you're going central like this, which means that this side of things remains fixed. 140s move towards the motherboard. This Kraken X61 is a 280, which means that it's really encroaching, or it's coming close. Encroaching is overstating it. It's coming close to the motherboard. You end up in the realms of make sure you, for example, you connect your, I don't know if you can see it up here, the 8-pin EPS connector. Depending on the cooling you're using, you may or may not be able to actually connect it once the fans are in place. You might indeed have to unmount the radiator or the fans in order to get your power supply connections in place, which is the sort of thing I find to be just boring, because if the case was a bit chunkier, if the radiator moved away, you're all good. The manual is perfectly acceptable but not brilliant. You're basically looking at line drawings like so, multilingual, so you do have to kind of figure out what's going on a little bit, but there isn't really a lot to be said. It's a case you put some stuff in. Except that there are one or two little wrinkles to it. So here we have essentially the drive towers, you know, describing it, or stealth plate if you want to call it that instead. Because these drive caddies, 5 of them, mount horizontally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in addition you have those 2.5-inch SSD bays there. Now the thing is that these caddies for mounting a 3.5 or indeed a 2.5 if you prefer, made of steel, and the mounts for the 3.5s are grommeted. They slide in like so and engage into little sort of lips on the back, so it sits on a little shelf. What it means is though is that as you're sliding it in, it's fresh air, as I hope you can see there, and you can certainly see in the photos, and it doesn't actually engage at the end until it's home. Those shelves are only like that deep, which means that while you're putting it in place, it's as likely to drop as anything. If you miss the little shelf it's aiming for, you're as likely to drop the blooming thing. And similarly, when you're removing one of these drive sleds or bays, you undo the 2 captive thumb screws, start to pull it. If you haven't got a firm grip on the thing, there's every chance to actually drop the drive because it's not sitting on any guide rails. And that I don't much like. So you've got 5 of these drive bays, add in the 2 SSDs, that's all the storage you could possibly want, no problem at all. Not exactly. And the reason I say that is that I mounted the liquid cooler with the hoses going this away rather than that away, because I didn't want the hoses getting engaged in that 140mm fan there. You can have the hoses feeding backwards if you prefer, in which case the radiator is the other way around, which gives you, clears up this gubbins here. That's fine, but you are risking contact with your fan blade. If the hoses come to the front, on the other hand, it means that those top 2 drive bays suddenly become a bit dubious. You can certainly feed rubber hoses through there, no problem at all, but it means you're kind of having to move them around your hard drives. So your top 2 drive bays, you'll probably have to give up to a decent sized liquid cooler. If you're using a 120, possibly even a 240, I shouldn't think it's an issue. Once you go 280 or longer, yes, it's an issue. The other thing is your graphics card. I'm using here a Sapphire Trix R9290, and it's longer than that point there. It encroaches in by about that. You can put a graphics card in up to 300mm with the drive bays in place, but as you can see, it overlaps. So you're losing this bay here, which essentially means that I've had to lose this bay for the graphics card and then the upper 2 bays for the liquid cooler. So I'm restricted to a bay down there and a bay down there. But if I have the bay in the bottom, I'm a bit restricted in terms of sort of packing in the cabling. I've ended up with I'm using the bottommost position, and I'm cramming some cabling in below it, and I've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4 emptied out, just from the point of view of making my life easier. So you've got stacks of drive bays, but you can't actually in the real world use them all. Not the end of the world, but not so exciting. It starts off looking a lot more impressive than it turns out to be in terms of the options and the variants that you can actually use. On the top of the case, we've got this sort of angled I/O panel, which obviously in the stripped down form looks a bit curious. It's got a pair of headset jacks, pair of USB 3, pair of USB 2, and that there is a power button. There's no reset button. There was on the H440, it's vanished on the N450. And the reason that the case is like that is because of this funky top and front panel. The reason I say funky is that they're angled, there's loads of mesh going on, which means that you actually have a lot more surface area than you'd have if you had a flat top and front to it. Incidentally, it's fairly obvious, but if you look at the front of the case with all those fans, look at the front panel, forget about an optical drive. If you're hung up on having an optical drive, and I know 1 or 2 KitGuru readers are, then realistically an external drive is your friend. However, having said that, you clearly are not going to put an external drive and rest it on top of the case, as we all sometimes do. You're not going to rest anything on top of this case. So forget about an optical drive. Now, this is quite smart, the styling. It is highly reminiscent to me of Phantom styling, some of the NZXT cases from the Phantom range. I can't actually swear it is identical to Phantom stuff, but it's certainly of that ilk. And what happens is, therefore, is that you have this sort of significant chamber above your top cooler, assuming you're putting a radiator in the top. Obviously, if you put a radiator in the front, you're having to ditch your standard front fans. Not the end of the world, seems a shame. Particularly as they're attached to a PWM hub, so they're not making a horrible rorty racket. Now, the thing is that having this angled sort of filter thing means that you've got far more surface area for air to flow through, and also you notice there that this top section is raised away, so plenty of room for air to flow. They give a figure of 10 times more airflow than the N440, which is, the H440, which is no doubt true, but the H440 was a quiet case, so it's a weird comparison. The point is you get plenty of airflow. That's really the thing to major on. And also you have enough space above the case. You can, if you choose, install radiators and push-pull, depending on your configuration. But you can certainly mount radiators and fans on the outside of the chassis. There's enough space in there to do that. So if we just line this up and snap it home, there we go. That's the top panel. And now let's see if the front panel behaves as nicely. And there we go again. And oh goodness me, forgot to put the full length air filter in. It sits in that little sort of recess at the bottom, and then 2 magnets at the top just to clip in place. Shan't bother pulling that off to do that. Works very nicely, by the way, and full length air filters I like. Incidentally, let me just show you the air filter at the bottom, which is your standard PSU sort of slide in from the rear job. Standard practice across the industry. I find it quite annoying in the sense that once your PC's installed, getting to the back and pulling out a filter can often be a bit like hard work. Were it to slide to the side, I would generally find that easier. But I'm sure on that one it's horses for courses. The side panel, the back side panel, is just plain steel. There's nothing to see there. I mean, it's nicely built. It's fairly solid. 2 captive thumb screws. And then let's see if we can put it in place with the case upright with all that cabling in place. Certainly much happier doing this laying down. Oh, looks like we've got a result. And then do that. Actually, I'm not sure I've engaged that fully. And then we have the main side panel, which is windowed. The H440, the window was a rectangle. Here they've gone for a slightly swoopy sort of thing, which is actually a little curious because once I put the panel in place, you'll see that there is actually not a lot extra to see because of that sort of significant stealth sort of panel going on. See? I mean, cosmetically quite nice, but there's actually nothing to see here, so why do we need to see a bit more of not much? So there we have it. So with the case fully assembled, smart. The styling is good, I like it. The fact you can't rest anything on the top, the fact it's quite tall because of the sort of the pent roof thing going on, so pitched roof rather, so be it. But in terms of airflow, the design works well. You can crank up your fan speeds as high as you like, it'll just flow more and more and more air. Starting on silent, I actually found that the Kraken X61 liquid cooler, this is with a bias on silent mode, it kept cool. And in fact, I couldn't hear the fans to the extent where I could hear the pump from the Kraken. Put it from silent up to standard profile, and the fans kicked up a little bit, not noisy, but I couldn't hear the fan. Couldn't hear the pump. And the curious thing was that actually I found the steady but not too noisy fans actually less disconcerting than hearing a tick 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 of the pump. One of those funny things, a little bit more noise in that instance was actually less distracting than the pump. Pricing. The case is, the SRP is $99.99, unfortunately plus VAT, so 100 quid, which means it would be 120. In actual fact, it's on sale for a penny under 110, 109.99. Now, considering the H440 is about £90, the question is, do you get your money's worth for the extra 20 quid? You lose the noise deadening material, you lose the boxy, I mean, very smart, but boxy styling, you gain the swoopy doopy phantom panels, you gain the lighting underneath. Fine, I mean, that really is one of those, okay, can't argue about it. Cable management continues to be as awkward or as easy as you might be. In fact, you have a bit more space for cable management, so actually that's not a fair criticism. Cable management slightly improved in the N450 over the H440 because you lose that neoprene. The lack of noise deadening material, it's not a noisy case because it flows so much air, you have so many fans, you can actually turn them down nice and quiet. So it has the potential for being rackety, but I would have said that if you're using this case, common sense says you actually build your own loop and you go to town, you use the front and the top. There is so much potential for building a liquid cooling system into this that it would be criminal to simply use the stock fans and but they are a decent basis. The PWM hub is a good piece of work, that works nicely. The cabling is a bit, it could have done with a little more thought, would that be the right word? I suppose so. Refinement, I suppose. I'm going to go with refinement. I would have liked the cabling to have been properly secured. After all, there's no reason for the owner to mess around with it. The cable in particular from the LED hub to the PWM hub, that after all, that's infrastructure, that's built into the case. You have no reason to mess with that. The fact that the cabling comes out of the power supply and sort of sits there, that's okay. It doesn't look great from this side. From this side it's invisible, so I can live with that. The drive plate arrangement, those caddies and that sort of stealth tower thing, I'm not mad keen on that because in practice you're not going to use all those drive bays, and you can't if you're having a liquid cooler running then if you've got a long graphics card. I would have liked a little more vertical clearance for the motherboard so I can actually hide the cabling away. On the other hand, with this high roof on the case, any extra height would be excessive. It's already quite tall. So while I'd like it to be taller, it wouldn't be a good idea. I'm torn on that one. And the toggle button on the lighting system works absolutely fabulously. No complaints there. I would certainly have liked to see a variant on the lighting, so variation. So 3 color LEDs or 4 color LEDs allow me to change to the colors I choose rather than just where do I want my blue lights. That would be nice. So there's scope for improvement there. The Kraken liquid cooler, it worked absolutely fine. It's an Ace Tech cooler. It's a big radiator. The rubber hosing is flexible. The cam monitoring software works well. It shows me what's going on. I'm happy with all of that. That Kraken X61 cooler, incidentally, list price is £120. You can find it on sale for about £100, which seems entirely reasonable. I would say it's a close contender to the high-end Corsair coolers with their Link software. So that's all fine. So here we have it. We have the NZXT Noctis or N450 case. It's swoopy, it's funky, it's pretty, it's not perfect, it does a good job. It's essentially a variant on various NZXT themes that we've seen before, kind of all pulled together. So it's an H440 with phantom stuff and a few extra bells and whistles. No harm in that. And I seem to recall, didn't they do a Razor edition with undercase lighting? Take that, put it all together, mix it up, deliver it. Could do a little more refinement, but it's a good case. I'm impressed by this one. So this is Leo Waldorf for Kit Guru with the NZXT Noctis 450.